I'd like to welcome everyone to this evening's 5 at 5 Minds and Money episode. We've been running this since the 2nd of April, and we're in June. We're still in semi-lockdown in different places, but it's been a fantastic series to get everyone together to talk about different things within the mining investment community. This week's host, as many of you now know, is Kerry Stevenson, who is from the Gold and Alternative Investment Conference, which unfortunately is not happening this year, but from my understanding, it's happening in Sydney in April 2021. So we definitely look forward to that. As always, we also thank our series sponsors and partners, the Melbourne Mining Club, with Richard Morrow there as chair, and the Melbourne Mining Club community and team. And we're very excited to let you all know that the APAC online event that we've been working on at Minds and Money is 120-something speakers, 850 attendees so far that have registered to take part in over the 23rd to the 25th of June. There are one-to-one business meetings that you can take part in if you're an investor or a miner. And also a number of plenary sessions, panel discussions, a 5 at 5 episode. We've even got keynote speakers with the Federal Minister for Resources, as well as Neville Power has just confirmed his place to come on board to speak about COVID-19 and the mining and resources sector's, influence on the recovery or the economic recovery. But do ask us for more information if you'd like us on the APAC online event. So I won't take up too much of your time, but as I said, everyone is on mute. During the Q&A sections, I will ask the group chat that's on the side. If you do have questions, either prompt me or let me know that you've got one, and I will unmute you and you'll be able to ask the speaker a question after their presentation, or otherwise in the Q&A at the end of the episode. Without further ado, Kerry, if you'd like to kick off and get the conversation started.
Thank you very much, Shireen. Well, welcome to the 5 at 5 with Minds and Money. As Shireen said, my name is Kerry Stevenson. I've been the founder of the Gold and Alternative Investments Conference, which was coming into its 11th year, but will be coming into its 11th year in 2021. I mean, who would have thought that we would all be sitting here looking like the Brady Bunch and talking via Zoom this time last year? It's come upon us pretty quickly that we've been able to change and use technology to be able to still communicate with each other. And look, I commend Minds and Money for putting this initiative together, and also thank them for allowing me to host this. And today we're going to hear from Barry Dawes, who's the Executive Chairman of Martin Place Securities. I've known Barry, goodness me, Barry, it's probably about 15 years now since I started in this business. And you've had a lot of successes over the years, not just in raising money, but your background is understanding the geology of the mines and traveling all over the world and talking to people about what's going on. Now, the focus this evening is clearly about gold. And I looked at the gold price today, and what's always fascinated me is on the news, they always talk about the gold price, and they never talk about it in Australian dollars. They always give us the US dollar gold price. But if you look at what's happening with currencies around the world and the change of the currency, and you look at gold in US dollars at 17.28, but in Australian dollars, it's almost 2,500 Australian dollars. Now, if the companies can't be making good money at that level, I'm not sure when we can, but I think we're in for a very, very strong next few years in the gold industry. I'd like to just hand over to Barry to take us through his views on where we are at the moment, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions after you've given your presentation. So Barry, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, thank you, Kerry, and thanks for everyone for coming along to listen to these people talk about some great stories. Gold. It's in a brilliant bull market, and it's got a long, long way to go, and it's not going to come back very much at all for the remainder of my lifetime. So, bull market is going to go on for a long time. The main reason for that is quite simple: debasement of currencies. We've seen too many politicians and bureaucrats loving to spend money and tax people, and the net effect of this is the depreciation of the currencies. At the same time, what we've got is two very, very important major economies in China and India, where the rising living standards mean that the people there recognizing prosperity and buying gold. And in the United States last year, we had considerable prosperity, and we had I think it was a record level of jewelry demand in the United States. And so the demand there, reflecting prosperity, was also rising. So we've seen a lot of gold that's actually gone from the west to the east over the last decade. And in the way I look at things, we've really got a deficit of gold in the west. So there's short covering, and people have to buy to go back to a normal weighting. So the drivers in gold are very, very strong on the demand side. We know that there's 185,000 tons of gold above ground, so that's always going to be there, but it's not enough for an expanding population where we really do have rising living standards despite what's happening in the short term. But if we go to our first slide and just look at the gold price, where it's been just over the last 12 months or so ago, it's broken through that 1365 level, and it's moved up in a number of legs. It's had periods of consolidation. This last leg, which took us up nearly to 1800, it's consolidated that. It's pulled back. It's supported on the break line for back test, and so I think we're going to see the next leg moving up. But the big picture for gold is a long-term one. And as I was saying, it's not going to come down very much in my lifetime. So if we go to our second slide, we see something, and if I can give attribution to Jason Atkinson from Schism on Twitter, he's given us 100 years of the gold price. And so the little wiggles we've seen over the past decade or so is pretty small when you look at the long term. And I think that we're going to be looking much up towards the right-hand side for gold over the next decade. And I think you're going to be really, really surprised how high the gold price is going to be rising. Now, we've seen the gold price rise in all currencies. We've seen all-time highs in almost every currency except the US dollar. There might be one or two of the Middle Eastern currencies where we haven't seen a new high because they have been quite strong currencies as well. So gold is rising in all currencies. When we step back and look at Australia, what we've got is an industry that's recovered. With our third slide, please. An industry which has recovered from the misery that we saw in the 2005, 2006, 2008 period when mine production fell quite sharply. In fact, gold production in WA fell almost 50% from 2000 to 2008. Despite that, the gold index went up by 750%. So clearly it wasn't driven by just the Australian gold industry. But what we're seeing at the moment is driven by the Australian gold industry. And we look at that dramatic improvement from just over 200 tonnes to around about 350 tonnes at the moment. And I can see this rising over the next few years as we see more gold from Victoria and more from the Pilbara. Now, we've got two companies today talking about the Pilbara and or Victoria, and those companies and those associated in regions nearby will be the drivers. So and if we have a look and see where Victoria and New South Wales fit in this overall growth of gold production in Australia, you see that they're doing very well. Now, on the next point to note on our fourth slide is what's happening with exploration. Now, we've found the gold, and so we're seeing gold production rising as a result of finding the gold. And now we're exploring, we're spending the money, we're spending over $1 billion Australian a year at record levels, and we're going to find a lot more gold. Now, finding costs are average around about $50 an ounce. Some companies do a lot better than that and might be talking about $10 an ounce, and others aren't quite so successful. But spending $1 billion is going to give us well over 20 million ounces of resource added to our inventory each year. Now, we're producing at 350 tonnes. That's about 11 million ounces. So we're actually getting more gold to our inventory than we're producing. So this is very exciting. We're starting to see it shown in the stock market. Now we've been talking I've been talking in terms of my views of the world, saying people should sort of stick with the big stocks, the Northern Stars and the Newcrest, the Evolutions, the Saracens and so on. And these things have done very, very well. And it's only been a few outside the leaders that have done well up until very recently. But the last 3 or 4 weeks have given the smaller stocks a real breath of fresh air, a bit of enthusiasm. Investors have made a lot of money. We've had these fabulous results from people like De Grey and Chalice, and just about everyone. And Kalamazoo's done well, and we're seeing good participation in the market. The companies have been able to raise funds, which they haven't been able to do for a couple of years now. So the whole industry is looking very exciting going forward. Now, if we look at our fifth graphic, this is the Australian gold index. There's only 20 stocks in this, and Newcrest makes up 38% of the index. So it's not a really representative index, and I've been very critical of the way ASX has treated indices in the resource sector. But what we've got is the market. Like the gold index was up over 5% today. It was up over 6% intraday, but we're up near the high of 8,500. That was 8,499 was the high in 2011, and we're getting up there again. And once we break through this thing, I see we've got a massive inverted head and shoulders pattern that will support much higher gold, much higher prices for our gold stocks over the next several years. Big stocks will just be paying out dividends. They won't be able to spend the money fast enough, and the little stocks will give, I think, really outstanding performance as the marketplace starts to recognise what the industry and the operators in the industry have given us. These people are technical entrepreneurs. The technology they use is fabulous. Kalamazoo can talk about some of the stuff they're doing in terms of reducing their finding costs and improving their efficiencies, reducing their risk. So the whole industry is dynamic, full of technology, and going a long way with hopefully all of us on board.
Barry, thank you very much for that overview. That's and you stuck to your 10 minutes, so I'm absolutely thrilled. Thank you, Barry. I'm sure we're going to have some questions from the floor. Shireen, have you got any there? Otherwise, I'll just have a chat with Barry.
If you'd like to start with the chat and any of the pre-submitted questions, Kerry.
Yep. Well, the first one, which is one that I get asked a lot as well, Barry, which is your analysis of the gold price has been spot on in the past. Where do you see the price going, and at what level? Well, you've mentioned a little bit of that in your talk, but go ahead.
I feel that 1,800 is a very important resistance level for the gold price, and we'll probably get up there reasonably soon. But I think there'll be a lot of work done through that. But once we break through that, we will go and get a new high above 1923, and I think it will be this year. I've basically been saying the same thing all year, and it might be right. I don't know, but that's what it looks like to me. The gold price has moved up a lot from that 1365, so it's a big price, and it's with a relatively strong US dollar, so it's a big move in all currencies. Longer term, we've got to be thinking of $3,500 probably within 2 years.
Wow.
And we're going to see a lot higher prices over time.
And do you see the sort of the supply demand factor coming in on that gold pricing as well, not just for the gold price itself, but for gold equities?
Look, I think if we think in terms of that 185,000 tonnes and the fact that a lot of gold has gone to India and China and left the West underweight. So this short covering might not necessarily have anything to do with financial crisis or whatever else you want to call it, currency weakness. It's just rebalancing. And I think that as we go forward, we're going to have a much higher price to stimulate additional supply and to bring out any scrap, because I really think there's very, very little scrap that's available, but basically it's just been sucked out of the market over the last several rallies in gold over the past decade or so. So the market's very, very tight. And when we've got a tight and short covering, it can just go anywhere. Anywhere. And it's not a matter of the end of the world. It's a matter of not enough gold to go around.
Well, and speaking of not enough gold to go around, mergers and acquisitions, Barry, do you see that some of the larger players are going to be looking to some of the people that we've got talking tonight and going, well, let's have a look at a play there? Do you think mergers and acquisitions coming, I guess, into 2021 at this stage would be on the cards?
I think we're going to see a lot of it, but I think it's probably going to be in the mid-tiers and the smaller groups. If we look at our big stocks, apart from, let's say, De Grey and Hemi, I can't see too many stocks that offer real increase in production and reserves to a Northern Star or a Newcrest here in Australia just at the moment. But consolidation within the groups, particularly when we've got producers with big operating margins and cash coming through, and clearly the equity markets are happy enough to provide funding for these things. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of activity, and I think we might be surprised that it's more at the lower end amongst the smaller players rather than necessarily the big ones.
So Kerry, we do have 2 questions from the audience as well. If
go ahead, Shireen.
Yeah, sure. So the first one, Jacob, do you want to ask your question?
Yes. Hi, Barry. My question was just what impact, if at all, will COVID-19 have on Australian gold production this year? You know, it's maybe slightly less affected than other countries in terms of shutdowns.
None. I mean, we did see some readjustment of panel rosters, and we've seen guidance from Northern Star, but just about no one else. So I don't see that as an issue. As you know, in Australia, the impact has been minimal in terms of the impact on the general population. So no, I don't see it having any effect at all. And you know, once we get these lockdowns lifted for travel to WA in particular, and into South Australia and Queensland, I think activity will pick up very briskly because the companies will have the funds to do the activity.
We have another question here from Alison Jeffrey. Alison, you're unmuted. Oh. Alison?
We've lost Alison.
Okay, that's okay. Alison's question is, in a nutshell, what are the advantages and disadvantages of gold bullion versus gold stocks, Barry, in your opinion?
Look, I think that people should have a gold bullion as a sort of last resort, and it should be somewhere where it's safe, and it should be small denomination, whatever it is. You don't want to have a huge 400-ounce bar somewhere, because not many people are going to be able to buy or cut it up for you. But if you've got 1-ounce coins or small bars, but really it should only be about 5 or 10% of your gold exposure. I think the rest really should be in gold equities, and we've got some outstanding companies now that are paying good dividends, and you know, we've been through a period of 20 years where there weren't any companies to pay gold companies to pay dividends, and now that's all changed. The character of the companies, the balance sheets that they have, and their resource growth and production expansion means that these things are really safe, and those things will be paying you very, very good dividends and growing dividends, and you should have a good exposure into the developers, and most definitely with the explorers. And we're going to find from the 3 guys talking today, they've got outstanding prospects, and you know, you want to be part of groups like those as well, because that's where you get real leverage.
But I also think that I agree with you, Barry, but I also think that people do need to do their own research, and sometimes people just don't fully understand what they're investing in. And I always say, look at management, and I think that the 3 companies tonight, great management. I think that's really important. And I agree with you. I think that a little bit of bullion it's almost like an insurance policy, but if you want the upside, have a look at the equities.
One more question directly for Barry before we move on, if that's okay, Kerry, is from Jeremy Samuel. So Jeremy, you're on unmute at the moment.
Thanks, Shireen. Hi, Barry. G'day, Kerry. Barry, I was asking about Victoria. You mentioned Victoria in passing, and I've actually been up in Omeo over the last couple of years looking at a couple of interesting mine sites, that historical mine sites. So I'm just curious what you see happening in Victoria, where you think the exciting regions are there. But also, you mentioned only 10% or so of your gold holding should be in bullion, and I have to say I'm a little surprised at that lower number. So I'm just wondering what the rationale for that is.
Oh, look, it varies from person to person, and on the age and investment time horizon. But at the end of the day, if you're in the gold business because you think gold prices will go higher for whatever reason, I think the liquidity of gold stocks, particularly the bigger ones, T+2 is fabulous liquidity, and the cost of storing gold and the issues involved in buying and selling it are not necessarily easy things to do. But that's my view. Other people have different views. I don't think the end of the world is coming. I talk about the Dawes points global boom ahead of us, not the end of the world. So, hey, I get more leverage out of equity than I will out of gold, even though I think gold prices will rise substantially in the years ahead. Thank you for the question.
Thanks, Jeremy. All right. Is that the end of the question, Shireen?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So, Barry, thank you very much. I'm sure we'll have some more questions at the end of these wonderful 3 presentations that are coming up. We're going to start with Luke Reinehr, who is the Chairman and CEO of Kalamazoo Resources, who's been having some great results and great news flow from Victoria. Luke, I'm going to hand it over to yourself.
Thanks very much, Kerry. And thank you, Barry, just for that introduction as well. I agree with you. It's a very exciting time to be in the gold industry at the moment. Great gold price with fantastic discoveries over the last couple of months. And there's definitely going to be some increased M&A, I think, over the next short term. I'd say for Kalamazoo, I know we haven't got a lot of time, but I think we're in a unique position for a gold explorer in Australia, in that we've got major assets and tenure in what we consider to be the 2 hottest gold regions in the world today, which are the Pilbara and the Victorian goldfields. Certainly in Victoria, we take a high-grade focus, and we're looking for a million-ounce plus deposit. Fortunately for us, in Victoria, we have ownership of 100% ownership of 2 major goldfields. First one is the Castlemaine goldfield, where historically almost 6 million ounces of gold, primarily all alluvial, was found. Next door to that, 10 kilometres to the west, is the South Muckleford project, a couple of million ounces at 27 or 28 grams. And the reason why the focus, I think, is on Victoria at the moment is very clearly because of a great Canadian company called Kirkland Lake, who's now discovered and mining, was probably considered to be not only the world's richest, but probably the most profitable gold mine in the world. So it's got everyone's focus. On top of that, of course, we've got the Victorian government, which has recently announced a land release tender of 4 large blocks of land surrounding the Fosterville mine. So that's got everyone's attention, a lot of the big players overseas and also locally. Kalamazoo, we've bid for that as well, and for a couple of those blocks, and I think we're all waiting now over the next couple of months for that to be announced. A lot of competition, but we think we're putting in a pretty good bid. I guess our flagship project is the one at Castlemaine. The interesting thing about it is, of that almost 6 million ounces, nearly all of it was alluvial. No one's ever found a hard rock source for that, and that's what's giving us the real encouragement to see, well, can we use a whole range of new technologies to try and help us identify the source of that rich gold. So what we're doing is we're doing a whole range of technologies, which a lot of people are doing, but we're using induced polarization, or IP. We're doing ground mag surveys. We're doing collaboration programs with the CSIRO on soil sampling. We're doing that right across our 2 projects, and we're seeing some really great results from that. To the stage that in late November last year, we started drilling our first maiden drill campaign, did about 4,500 metres, got some really high-grade hits, and based on that, we then attracted the attention of Eric Sprott and Novo Resources to come and make an investment in Kalamazoo. So I guess that kind of put us on the radar for the investment community, and it's been very good for us, not just in that regard, but also it's given us the support and the validation for us to then go and bid for the ground round Fosterville, etc. Got a lot of work to do at Castlemaine, but I guess the other one, of course, is in the Pilbara.
Well, let's, Luke, I'm just going to interrupt you for a second. Did you want us to put up the slides that you've got?
Yeah, that'd be great, Kerry. Perhaps that first slide.
Yeah, let's put up Luke's first slide if we could.
And this will just put a bit of context. I won't spend much time on it, but you can see that the block on the right-hand side, that's the Castlemaine goldfield, world's richest alluvial goldfield. Over 2,500 shafts are recorded in that area, but it's all literally at surface or quite shallow. And you go only 10 kilometres to the west, and you've got the South Muckleford project, 2 million ounces, but nearly all underground at 27 grams. So that gives us again the confidence that we think there's a very big prize to be found at Castlemaine, and we've just got to spend a lot of money, a lot of drilling. We know that, but it's basically been untouched for over 100, 150 years. Perhaps then if I just go to the next slide, if I can. And this now just talks about our other portfolio of projects. We've got 3 really good projects in the Pilbara. De Grey obviously has put it back on the map again, primarily with their Hemi deposit. We've got what we call the Sisters project, which is along that same structure, that what they call the Tabba Tabba shear zone. And again, we're collaborating with the CSIRO and others, doing major soil campaigns. We've just completed a major aeromagnetic survey and RAD survey over that. So we'd expect to be drilling there, very shortly. So I guess just in a nutshell, we've got a market cap of about $70 million now. We're fully funded. We've got about $11 or $12 million cash and receivables in the bank. A lot of OPIs or options that are now in the money. And we're continuing to look at other projects in both the Pilbara and in Victoria to see if we can expand our portfolio of projects. So very exciting time. And as Barry said, this is the right time to be in gold.
Luke, thanks very much for that. If Shireen's got any questions, I'm sure she'll let me know. I've got one for you, Luke. You started off in Victoria. What was the reasoning for going across to the Pilbara and picking up over there? I mean, for a long time, from my understanding, the Pilbara was kind of like, it's not really got much there. But all of a sudden, with De Grey coming on and getting some exciting discoveries, and of course we're going to hear from Terry in a moment. What was the reasoning for going across to the Pilbara? Obviously.
Yeah, absolutely, Kerry. It's quite interesting. It's actually going back to our roots, believe it or not. Kalamazoo was started by my brother Matt and myself 10 years ago, and we were a private company for the first 7 years, and we only listed about 3 years ago. But while we were private, we actually formed a close relationship with a well-known WA or Pilbara prospector called Dennis O'Mara. And that's where we ventured into a couple of projects, got a very close relationship with the O'Mara family. And so we've always actually been involved in the Pilbara. But of course, we're Melbourne based. And so when we saw that what was happening in Victoria, we very quickly got onto that. But perhaps we haven't spent as much time on our Pilbara projects over the last couple of years, but it's very much, front of mind for us. And we're very excited with what's happening there. And, it's a great portfolio of projects we believe we've got on both sides of the continent. And fortunately for us, we've got a great team in WA as well. So that's enabled us to, during COVID-19, to actually give focus to both projects independently. And that's worked out really well for us.
Oh, well, congratulations. I think it's, and obviously having Sprott and Novo on the register as cornerstone investors makes it a lot of people sit up and take notice, because Eric Sprott doesn't just throw money around willy-nilly.
No, absolutely.
Shireen, do we have any questions from the floor at this stage?
No, strangely enough, no one has submitted a question at this particular time.
They're all being very quiet and subdued. Well, we'll change that shortly. As I said right at the beginning, there's no such thing as dumb questions.
Yeah. We may have a question for Luke a little bit later, but at this stage, there is nothing that's come through.
Luke, I've got a couple more questions, but we'll get through the presentations and we'll come back to you at the end. But thank you so much.
Someone just has put up a question. It says, and unfortunately the audio is not working, but the question is around the timeline for mining. So Luke, when do you think that that may get started? And go ahead.
Yeah, look, it's still a little bit down the track. We've obviously got to find a resource before we do that. And even though we had some great high-grade hits at our first drill campaign in November, we're still got a long way to go to do a resource. So, that's down the track. So, I can't give a time on that. But like Terry said, I think just earlier, we're an explorer. That's our game. That's what gets us excited, and that's what we're looking to do. See if we can find discover a big resource, and then it gives us options as to whether we would develop it or another party would do that.
You want to find that 2 million ounces at 27 grams per tonne, don't you?
It'd be fantastic.
Luke, thanks very much. We'll come back to you. Okay, moving on to our next presenter. It is Mark Strizek from Tietto Minerals. I've known Mark for a few years now. It's a very interesting story. They only listed in 2018, and at that stage had a resource, I think it was about 700,000, but I'm sure, Mark, you'll correct me. Now we're looking at 2.2 million ounce resource. They've got their own rigs, and here to tell the story, please welcome Mark Strizek.
Thanks, Kerry, and thanks everyone for hanging in today. It's a very simple story, Tietto. So as Kerry said, listed in 2018, and I might just get the if they just throw up the slide there in the back, and just to give you a bit of a feel that for talking points, because I think the key to think about with Tietto is that it has actually been quite a little bit of an easy ride. Essentially, this deposit at ABUJAR, which is in Côte d'Ivoire, was discovered by artisanals, and you can kind of think about Orbis and the success they had. So the founder of the company, Kagan Wang, was on the ground there in 2015, was private, and then we took it public in 2018. So with 700,000 ounces, and that the takeaway there, remembering, is just rapidly growing high-grade gold in Côte d'Ivoire. And the reason we're there is because you can make some fantastic exploration success. So as Kerry said, the drill rig. So we'll just kind of jump off to the next slide, if that's possible, and we'll just kind of touch on some of the milestones we've been able to achieve in a very quick time. So just going on. Can I move to the next slide? Can I or not?
No, Elaine. Yeah.
Yep, certainly I can. I've got control now, which is fantastic. I'll just go one more if that's possible. We've just got the disclaimer there. So just kind of giving you a bit of a snapshot on the development. So we are already at that critical milestone of a multi-million ounce resource. That's a mixture of 900,000 ounces at 1.8, which is in indicated category. The rest of it is in inferred. We're very excited about ABUJAR because we can see a standalone within that resource, what we call the high-grade core. There's 1.4 million ounces at 2.2, which we think is really shaping up as a standalone project. The key differentiator for us is that we, drilling, obviously, unless you drill, you don't discover and you don't grow. And as juniors, you get locked into that cycle of constantly going back out small projects. So we actually, because we listed with a resource, we knew we had something, and we knew it was going to grow just based on what we could see. So we made the decision to buy our own drill rigs. We've currently got 5 on site, 4 of them actively working right now, and that's allowing us to drill what is a very large growing system at incredibly cheap costs. It's costing us around about $35 a meter US, and so it really means we can go after these targets very hard and grow very, very aggressively, because time is money in this game. And I think, as Barry said, obviously we're looking forward to prices well over 2,000, but right now the gold price is absolutely fantastic. And when you can have, say, 1.4 million ounces at 2.2 or better within that core, you're really starting to see the genesis of something which is quite large, quite valuable. One of the keys about our land package that Kagan, the MD, was able to pull together is we've got, there's around about 70K of strike length there. And we've only really just begun here at touching the surface. There's lots more work to do. Some of the things to look forward to in terms of time this year, we're embarking on, as we said there, the 50,000 metre drill program. That's going to see us through to a major resource update in Q3 this year, and we're aiming for around about September. So once we finish that resource update, we'll continue the drill rigs. The other part of the work that we're going to be looking to go into is a pre-feasibility study. We've already done some metallurgical test work, and the results are very, very good. Based on what we knew at the start, we're seeing gravity recoveries of in excess of 80%, CIL cleanup taking us to around about 99%. The rocks here are, the resources hosted in a fresh sheared up granodiorite. And the energy usage for that, we've been releasing some metallurgical test work that we use as inputs into our PFS. The energy is probably about 30% less than some of our peers there. So setting ourselves up for a very simple gravity front end, which is very cheap for recovery, and then a very clean up with CIL. So I'll just go to the next slide if that's possible, and just wrap up and show what we've done. So really we've had our pedal to the metal here, going very hard from IPO in January 2018 to delivering that initial 700,000 ounces, and just getting on with it with multiple resource upgrades to delivering 2.2 million ounces in November last year. And remember that has a high grade core, 1.4 million ounces at 2.2. We embarked straight away onto a drill program at 50,000 metres. We're well more than 60% of that done. So that 50,000 metres will feed into another resource update, which is due in September this year. So it's definitely something to look forward to. We think it's going to be quite substantial. We're rolling straight away into a PFS, which we based on that. And that delivery would be in, as we said, January 2021. We do have funding in end of March there, around about $30 million Australian. And the fact that we've been able to totally break that nexus of costs and take control of it, it really allows us to drill our dollars further, I guess, is just to quote Bob Ansett. So the key here is, it's already a major multi-million ounce resource. We definitely think that when we look at the strike length and the potential, there's definitely the ability to grow it even further. And having that drill capacity in-house means that we can drill it much, much cheaper than anyone else. So, I think that could be a couple of minutes.
Yep, going to finish you up there. Thank you very much, Mark. Amazing results you're getting there, and very, very quickly, rapidly. Shireen, I know you're going to interrupt me if we've questions from the
Yeah,
floor.
I do. We do have one actually.
Okay, I'll just start off with my first one. Mark, just a quick one on the geopolitical risk over in ABUJAR. Is that the right way to pronounce it? I mean, what is it like working over there? Obviously, in Australia, we know that it's a good jurisdiction. What is it like over where you're working?
Look, it's absolutely fantastic. I mean, I've got my background in Burkina in Niger, enjoyed my time there, but Ivory Coast is it's very sophisticated. Mining isn't the main game. It's only about 2% of GDP, but the infrastructure is very good. Dual lane highways, hydroelectric power, the export power to all of their neighbours. So, and you've also got a pretty sophisticated workforce. So it looks very good. We've seen there with Perseus, with Sissingué, and now moving into Yare. So there's another ASX listed company that's had great success, and in being able to expand and develop gold mines. There's around about 32 tons of gold currently being produced in Côte d'Ivoire from five gold mines. And then there's outside of Perseus, there's Endeavour as well, which is a fairly large player in the space. But the government is quite committed. We caught up with the minister at Indaba this year. They'd like to take mining to about 4% of the GDP. So it's a nice spot. It's quite good in the regard that it's not the main game in town, but there is a commitment from government in terms of the fiscal regime and the mining law that they put in place to try and attract investment like they've seen in Burkina and Mali, and they really want to get on with it. And the great thing is there's the opportunity, like we've been able to do, is make multi-million ounce discoveries, and it's hard to do it. And sometimes I've got to pinch myself and just being part of this, because we're moving at a breakneck pace, moving very fast.
Yep, helps having your own rigs in house as well. Shireen, over to you.
Yeah, Simon Mitchell from Southern Gold has a question for you, Mark. Simon?
You know, thanks for that, Mark. Very interesting, and I did catch my eye about the $35 per metre drilling cost. Question is, did you execute that with local crews, or did you have to bring in expats? And perhaps associated with that is, did you have any challenges going down that path?
Yeah, so it, I think there has been, it's never an easy road, but it's gone relatively smoothly. So number one, buying the rigs, putting in the capital, enough spares, and currently we are using expatriate drillers, and the plan is, along the way to be able to train up some locals. So all the locals are working with us as offsiders right now, but currently it's an expatriate operation.
Another question, and I've got to read this one out, is the market cap of African explorers is so much lower than equivalent in Australia. Do you expect it to improve once the company is producing, and when do you think this might be?
Yeah, so look, I think you can see that there's a little bit of disconnect. I think I was talking to an analyst the other day, and they said if you just announced that you were moving the project into West Australia, there'd be an immediate bump. I mean, it is a case that when you look at someone like Perseus and so on, there is that appreciation. I think as some of those valuations in Australia start getting topped out to a degree, and people look for where can I really find that 10 bagger or that real uplift, then you start looking across. Because I think one of the fantastic things about Western Africa, and we look at people like obviously Perseus and also West African Resources, the execution, and I shouldn't forget Roxgold or Yaramoko, the execution of these projects has been absolutely fantastic, both from a geological and technical sense, and also through into the mine development where everything has gone well. And I guess it is, again, it's probably that factor that you're held under a stronger spotlight or so. So it's, I mean, we're looking at some fantastic analogues when you think about the performance of West African, and it's something that we want to try and emulate at this stage, getting that PFS under our belt, a maiden reserve, coming up in the not too distant future is, really allows people to start putting, some hard economics about us, but still on the other side, looking at an incredible blue sky in terms of that runway of targets that we've got, that real pipeline, that real portfolio.
Excellent. We might move on to the next one, Kerry.
Thanks, Shireen.
Thanks,
All
Mark.
right, from Africa back to Australia, across to the Pilbara. Delighted that Terry Topping, the chairman of KAIROS Minerals, is joining us now to tell us his story. They have a very large strategic land holding, and that's in the epicenter of the Pilbara Gold Province. So here to tell the story, welcome to you, Terry.
Thanks very much for that introduction, Kerry. Thanks to the Mines and Money crew, Barry and the other speakers. If we can get the slides up, I'll use them from the start. So yeah, KAIROS has been focused in the Pilbara now for the last 2 or 3 years. It started with the acquisition of about 100,000 ounces at our Mount York project. The focus on that early on was to sort of grow ounces. One of the discussion points about the Pilbara is the lack of processing facilities. And a discount to a valuation on your ounces, because people go, well, where are you going to put it? We moved that and shifted really back to exploration. So if you look at a corporate summary of the company, our share price is at a 12-month high, which is nice, which improves our market cap, and also that's helped us on the back of raising capital. So we're sort of north of 3 million now, with a $1.7 million rights offer that's currently, we're finalising the documentation. We'll get that out to shareholders. We priced that at 1.1 cents, and we've moved a bit since then. So I'm getting a fair bit of interest from shareholders to take further allocations, and lots of people who would now like to underwrite something that's well in the money. That's why we love brokers. So just mentioning our shareholders, we've also got Eric Sprott as a major shareholder. We have been in the Pilbara, like I said, for a few years, and Eric and the Novo guys are still there, very active. Novo's still got about 50 million cash. They're spending a lot of money. They're focused on more alluvial gravels in the Pilbara. We've got some potential for that. But what I'd like to talk a bit more today, if we go to the next slide, is where we're at. we've got, like I said, an area with a production history. It was the old Linus Fine mine, mined as it's there in the late 90s. You know, the gold price in then was only 350, you know, Aussie, maybe, you know, it was pretty bad. And we've moved that up to 873,000 ounces with our latest update in March 2020. But really the focus for us most of last year was generating more targets. I think the grade, where we are, as I said earlier, the lack of processing facilities, you need to add some grade. And what we found when we started doing exploration for what was the conglomerate gold and finding nuggets was we did a lot of regional stream sediment work. And that led us to finding large areas which were prospective for gold. What the style is and what it turns out to be, we'll still determine. But if you look at what we've got there on the right at Fuego, that's sediment hosted, it's not conglomerate hosted. There's a picture there on the front page, and that gold in a quartz arenite just shows you can get spectacular grades. This is a large feature next to one of the largest regional structures, and we haven't drill tested this. We got all the heritage surveys and everything done and finalised that late last year. Obviously with COVID, we've had a bit of a slow start to the season, but the guys are up there as of this week. We've had to find a different way into this area, as we can't at the moment go through one of the Aboriginal communities, so we can do that. But we're hoping with the way things are going in WA, those restrictions will get lifted pretty soon anyway. But if not, we've now got alternate access back out here, and we'd look to be drilling in late July and definitely in August. So, and I think that you know, exploration results is all about getting drilling done. I think these results probably didn't resonate with investors last year, given the market. You know, like finding gold in soils is interesting, but they want discoveries, and you don't discover things. Well, I think this is how you do it, but you need to drill holes. So if we go to the next slide, and this puts a bit in where Fuego is down in a regional perspective. You've got Hemi up the top there. Hemi sits only 60 k's from Port Hedland. You're in a world-class Tier 1 mining jurisdiction. De Grey's centre of gravity was really heading probably further west with Taorana through last year, and their centre of gravity is definitely pushed back towards Port Hedland with Hemi, which is going to be world-class. You can see that we've got a lot of land holdings in the area and around these large, interesting that you've got the Sisters project there, Luke. There's the granites in the area called the Sisters Super Suite. Hemi is an intrusion of the same age, sitting around the edge of that. A lot of our land holding is targeted for that style, mainly because when we were there the first time, we were looking for lithium and pegmatites as much as we were looking for gold. So that's transition. So basically what you've got is a large regional play now on the back of the new style at Hemi. It really does give us an exciting opportunity to look at things like more detailed aeromag, which we will start next week, and look for not just sedimentary hosted, but intrusion hosted mineralisation. So from a company that's quite well funded now, we've got a couple of years up our sleeve. So if you just go to the next one. Yeah, so we've really got, just in a quick summary, because you've only given us a few minutes, it really is a high quality strategic ground position in the Pilbara. It really was focused on the edge of this Sisters Super Suite when we first pegged it. That puts us in good stead now with this new discovery and new style at Hemi. We've really been focused on the Pilbara for the last couple of years. The sentiment for the Pilbara conglomerates washed in and washed out very quickly, but we just kept finding a lot of gold. And I just think as an exploration guy, if you find a lot of gold, you just keep going. So we've done that. We've also moved the resource to 873,000 ounces, which is a good base for the company. Kangan and Skywell are two areas where we've done very little work, which will become an emerging focus. We've already started our field exploration this year, which is great. It's a really good place to be with sort of temperatures in the 25 to 30s and clear blue skies. So if any of you in Melbourne feeling cold, just remember that. as Barry said, it's a fantastic gold price now. I'm going to hold him to 3,500, was it, in a few years? Even if you're wrong, Barry, if it flatlined from here, we'd still be all right. And look, our market cap now has moved. Probably we got down to a 5 mil market cap a few months ago, and De Grey, has moved only really in the last 3 or 4 months. And I think the takeaway from that is, as one person described, we walk down the stairs and go up the lift. If you look at share prices, that's what happens. Discovery makes a big difference, and that's what all of us are here, and that's what we're about. And we're well funded to really have a good crack at that this year.
Terry, thank you very much. That was a great presentation, and I know that things are changing rapidly for you, and so congratulations on that. And a lot of news flow coming out with the drilling starting in July and August, and it's good to hear that you've managed to get your team reassembled, COVID or no COVID. Shireen, questions?
No, there's no direct questions for Terry either.
Okay, so I'll throw one at you, Terry. Do you think, you've been up there for a couple of years, and you and I have spoken over the years, and, there's been a lot of, naysayers that have said, oh, what are you doing up in the Pilbara? And probably a few people saying to you, give it up, there's no point. Obviously, Eric Sprott sees something different because he's an investor. What do you think? Do you think it's just because of the De Grey Hemi discovery it has put the spotlight on yourself? Do you think that's fast-tracked where you're at? Or do you think it would have happened anyway?
No, I think it's all mainly to do with us.
Of course it is.
Probably not. Look, no, there's definitely De Grey makes a difference. I think people look at results and they go, okay, what did De Grey have? Go back and have a look at what De Grey had 6 months ago and what were they doing and what were they doing right. And from an investor point of view, you look at these sorts of things because, the share price moves so quickly. You've got to sort of see those signs, and it's fair enough. Look, my background in the Pilbara goes back to Taipan in '93 and the discovery of Paulson's. So if I look at Fuego, it's in the same geology as Paulson's. Oh, wow. And I know a bit about, finding high-grade gold in the Pilbara. So as much as KAIROS has been there the last few years, we've got guys that have been in the Pilbara for 20 plus. So I think there's not been the consistent discoveries. And I think a lot of that is it is pretty remote in areas. It takes a while to get around. But it shows, and I think what's happening now is on the back of funding for the conglomerate story. It just shows if you get funding, things get done. And that's when things happen. Yeah.
Yeah, well, without funding, you can't explore. Without exploring, you can't find. And without finding anything, no one's interested.
We don't get money, we're doing soil sampling.
Correct. Yeah. Which doesn't excite too many people. Shireen,
no.
Anything?
But it generates targets.
So, no, we don't, but we do have 2 questions for 2 of the other panelists, if we were
I'd just like to say thank you, Terry.
Yes, thank you.
I, for one, am going to be, because, I love chatting to you guys, I love figuring out what's going on, but, I am an investor, I look at things like this, and it's really good that we've got the opportunity to talk directly with the 3 of you tonight. It's certainly going to go on, all 3 of you. I think you've got great stories, and it's certainly really, right now, I think it's been a long time coming, and we've gone through some tough times in the gold market, but you've stuck at it. And I think the next few years are going to be really, really interesting. And I think certainly for the Australian gold industry, and even, where you are, Mark, over in Africa, Côte d'Ivoire, I think we're all going to start to sit up and take a little bit more notice. It'll be interesting if the gold price starts to strengthen, if we see some of the sort of the general public starting to sit up and take notice rather than just the industry itself in the next couple of years. Sorry, Shireen?
There was a question earlier that was directed at Barry that I didn't get to ask. It was the AUD/USD is buffering the Australian dollar gold price. Is it best to invest in Australian gold companies versus US listed gold companies, in your opinion, Barry?
Well, as I said earlier on, the gold industry in Australia sort of bottomed well before North America, and North America has really only been running now for a year or so. So there's some better value in the North American market than there is in the Australian market in terms of relative share performances. But you've got to keep in mind that it's my view that the Australian industry is far superior in terms of the way it runs with open cut mines, because it's done that very, very well. And the way we're doing underground mine, and I think we're seeing with Evolution, with Campbell Red Lake, and obviously Northern Star with Pogo and Newcrest into Red Chris, we're basically taking out our technology and our operational skills offshore. Clearly too, as Mark was saying, what the Australian companies have done in the Birimian in West Africa has been really quite superb as well. But the $A is going much higher in my view. We will see the $A above parity over the next few years, but that's going to be accompanied by a much higher gold price. The gold price and the $A do run together to some degree, and if you've seen my work, the correlation between the Philadelphia Gold Index and the $A is extremely strong, going back over the last 30 years or so. So don't worry about the $A rising, because it means that the Australian gold shares become more attractive to other countries' investment managers because they've got a rising currency. And also a rising currency pushes productivity gains. It forces you to improve your general operational efficiency and doing things smarter. So it's very, very good for the industry to have a strong currency. And that means that the quality of the companies counterintuitively actually improves. So don't worry about it. You'll find lots of opportunities in Australia, and sure, you'll find lots of opportunities in North America. And the way we can have international brokers, I just encourage you to do your own due diligence and look for whatever you can find. But at the end of the day, you know that you've got good managers, and you know that the industry in Australia is experienced and very respected overall.
Okay. There's a question here also for Luke at Kalamazoo. Is the nature of the gold in Castlemaine similar to the nuggets style often found around Ballarat and Bendigo, or is it arsenal pyrite style like at Fosterville?
Thanks for that. Castlemaine is actually quite different from the saddle reef type gold structures that we're seeing in Bendigo and Ballarat. We're actually seeing more similarities to the Fosterville style, very much structurally controlled. In our first drill campaign of those 14 holes that we put in, diamond holes, just a couple of months ago, we're seeing anomalous gold in every hole. There's a mixture of visible gold, but also widely disseminated, predominantly hosted in the quartz. So what we would say, which is really interesting, is that in an area of maybe 100 square kilometres, we're seeing different types of hosted golden structures throughout that area. You're seeing epizonal, you're seeing the Fosterville structures, Castlemaine, go 10 kilometres further to the west, as I mentioned, and it's very high grade hard rock at our South Muckleford project. So I think the lessons we're all learning is that there's no one answer. I think it was actually Terry saying before, it's all different, and you just got to keep your wits about you and use as much, I guess, technology and smarts as you can. And that's one of the reasons why we've been very keen to have a number of collaboration programs with the CSIRO, and we're trying to bring in the best brains we can get.
Excellent. All right, that's I think a wrap from the question side, Kerry. And yeah, have any last comments, Kerry, before I close off?
Just a comment on the question about investing in America or Australian stocks. I mean, I always think that so long as you know the management and so long as you understand what the company is, okay, hedge and diversify. But I personally, just a personal opinion, I'm not a financial advisor, but I personally prefer the Aussie gold stocks because I think that the management, we understand them, and yeah, that's just a view I have. And in terms of investing, it's always best do your own research. But that's why I think a forum like this, where investors can come along and have a listen to management and what they've got to say. And I'm sure the three of you and yourself, Barry, would say that if people want to reach out to you, they can and ask questions. At the end of the day, it's a very, very exciting time in the gold market.
I think you're absolutely right there, Kerry. It is a very exciting time, and I think these three companies really show the skills of the Australian exploration industry in the different areas. Without a doubt, Victoria is just going to be fabulous over the next decade, and those.
So and my immediate response to that is well, why would we put any money in it if we didn't think it was worth it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry, I missed that one.
No. Well,
Yeah, look, I don't think that's quite been.
I think we had a small glitch there, but that's okay. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, Barry. I think everyone was unmuted for a small second. Technical difficulty right here at the end. Look, I do want to wrap up the session, and Simon Mitchell just pointed out a really good session, fantastic miners and presenters. Barry, thank you for your time. Kerry, thank you so much for hosting the session and being part of the event. As I said, it's great to have Kerry's support for the episode, and the Melbourne Mining Club's obviously support of the series. And next fortnight, the episode is actually part of our APAC Online event, and it is Queensland focused with the Brisbane Mining Club hosting that particular one. So we look forward to seeing a bunch of investors and miners for that conference and event, which is 4 hours of these sorts of presentations and sessions. So if you have that spare time to be part of it and take part in the networking and the meetings, then please do join us. But thank you so much. And you'll see in the chat room just there a lot of the thanks that are coming through from the audience. So thank you so much.
Nice to see you, Richard.
Hi, Richard. Thank you.